Hi, I'm James, and in today's video I am taking a look at this, which is the new Dell Inspiron 14-inch. This is the 5406 model, and it is one of their convertible 2-in-1 systems, so with the 360-degree hinge and rotating screen, which is touchscreen. And so first of all, just unboxing the product itself, we have in the top here the usual. This is a 45-watt charger, UK power cable, then digging down through, nice to see that they are putting things in cardboard inserts, so there isn't huge amounts of plastic inside the box. Obviously the laptop itself is wrapped in it, and here we have the machine. And then our safety information guide, EU bits and pieces, and some silica gel, and not a lot else. So a fairly bare bones set inside the box, but let's take a look at the machine itself and what it offers. So looking at the machine itself, it's finished in a fairly standard for Dell grey, with the Dell logo obviously on the top, and we see this is 14-inch unit. We have relatively thin bezels each side. It'll be easier to see once this is powered on. But inside, again, same grey finish. We have quite a large touchpad for the 14-inch size of machine. We have the power button. It's also a fingerprint sensor, which is a nice touch on these models. And overall, fairly standard looking laptop. What we do have, of course, being a convertible, we have the folding hinge, and pleasingly Dell have kept the webcam at the top on this, unlike some of the XPS models where it was down in the bottom corner, which is a terrible place for it. And there is a little hardware switch for privacy on the camera. Flipping it back around, and one thing I will say straight out of the box is I will be comparing this to my 13-inch Dell HP Envy, which I have previously featured, and Dell I think have got a much nicer key layout, particularly sort of the slash key on the HP involves a press of Alt and was very strange, and I certainly prefer the layout on this. Other specifications of this particular machine. So this is a Core i5, and we can see it has the 11th generation badging here because it is the i5-1135G7. The G7 in the processor name indicates that it has Intel Iris Xe graphics. Slightly confusingly, despite having the same G7 as the i7 models, in the i5 it has 80 execution units, not the full 96 of the i7 models. It might have been perhaps nice if they designated that by perhaps calling the graphics core a G6 or G5. They previously had G1, G4 and G7. Now they just seem to give you 4 and 7 and don't differentiate that different EU count. Otherwise we have a 256GB SSD, which is a M2 PCIe type drive. We have 8GB of RAM, which is a single DDR4 3200 SODIMM. I believe it is a DIMM module in this with 2 slots inside the laptop. I will be looking at that in another video. We also have 802.11ax wireless and what Dell term as a wide viewing angle display. Looking at ports, and starting with the left hand side of the device, we have our power jack with charging indicator LED, HDMI port, which is only HDMI 1.4, so slightly disappointing in that will only allow you to do 4K at 30 Hz through it, or 1080p at 60 Hz. We then also have our USB 3.2 Gen 1 port, so a standard USB-A style port which can deliver up to 5 gigabits per second throughput, and then also our USB 3.2 Gen 2 USB-C port which can deliver 10 gigabits per second of throughput and also supports display port, so that could be used for your 4K 60Hz output, and also supports power delivery. So if you have a suitable dock, this could also be used for charging the laptop. Turning around to the right side, and we have our little Kensington lock, a combined microphone and headphone jack. So the option in software of either using that as a microphone input or a headphone output. I haven't tested as to whether it works with the sort of 3-ring plugs, which are both. Then we have an additional USB 3.2 Gen 1 port here, and then we have a full-size SD card slot as well. So quite nice that if you do run a camera like the one I'm actually recording on now, where I use a full-size SD card, not a micro, I do have the option of plugging things into this full size rather than a micro, as per a lot of devices. One other feature which I've noticed on sort of just first impressions is that as we open the screen, the way the hinge works on this machine, we can see, or rather the way the bezel works, is that as we open the screen, it lifts the base of the laptop as the hinge comes down here, and this gives an air gap between the base of the machine and the surface, assuming you're working on a hard surface, which allows access to the cooling vents and should help the thermals of this machine when you're working on a hard surface like a desk or table. Having done the initial setup of the machine and just firing it up again from a shutdown, and I have to say, I've noticed this the first few times I've tried it, the actual button press to initial post is quite long. Once we get past that stage, it's pretty quick to go to the desktop, as you would expect given the specifications with this quad-core i5 and the the performance of the PCI Express SSD. You'd expect it to be pretty quick on that. I will look for updated firmware for this, just in case there are any improvements in that boot time, and also check the BIOS options as well. Looking at the keyboard and touchpad specifically, and the keyboard in initial use I've not really found any issues with. It has, obviously it's plastic caps, plastic chassis, so it's as you'd expect. The keys have reasonable travel. As I said before, found key layout good, and you do have the backlight, which hopefully you can see in the video, has off, lower level and higher level of illumination. The touchpad I've found, again, absolutely fine. You have your usual gesture support. Initial thoughts was it felt very slightly tacky, but to be honest, you tend to find that with a new touchpad, these things kind of wear in a little bit. But first impressions, no real complaints on that side of things. Looking at the fingerprint sensor and having trained it, it's as you would hope, very fast and efficient at signing you in. I did have, when I first set it up, a bit of an issue where it was sometimes not picking up sort of the edges of the finger. I removed the fingerprint and retrained it, and having done that, it seems very fast and effective. Personally, I like Dell's choice of applying the fingerprint sensor here. On the HP Envy, you have this extra button, which is purely used as the fingerprint sensor and kind of messes up the lower portion of the keyboard layout. I think that Dell's choice of integrating it into the power button here, a much better decision than HP made on those Envy X360 13-inch machines. I also like, so this doesn't have the hello camera support. So we will see in here, sign in options, we do not have hello face support. Personally, I don't actually like that anyway. Basically, I tend to set up my machines with two accounts, one for personal side and one for work. And what I do is I train one finger to my work side and another to my personal side, and that's great because I have multiple fingers. when you train face recognition, I only have one face, so that doesn't work. I can only use it to sign into one account. So certainly over the camera option, Fingerprint is my preferred choice, and this seems to work most of the time pretty quickly and effectively. Obviously, being a glass-fronted touchscreen, it is a glossy finish, but Dell's claims of wide viewing angles certainly seem true. So even with fairly extreme viewing angles, I don't see much in the way of colour shift, so it seems a nice quality display. I did not notice anything in the way of sort of excessive backlight bleed. Colour reproduction seems pretty good. It's not an incredibly high brightness panel, but we do have, you know, a fair range of adjustment. It goes a lot darker than the HP Envy I have, which is actually something that annoys me because sometimes at night the HP Envy is just too bright, but it has similar sort of peak brightness levels. I don't know the exact value that Dell quote for it in terms of nits, but it's certainly for my use more than adequate. It may struggle a little if you're using it in very bright conditions outside, though, being a reflective display with that glass front. Now, connecting the system up to our capture card, and we're just going to take a look at the Windows install as it comes out the box. And if we go in, first of all, to System, we can see confirmation that we have that i5-1135G7, and the system ships with Windows 10 Home, and it is the 2004 build of Windows 10. Despite this, it still ships with the later Chromium-based version of Microsoft Edge. I believe fresh installs normally of 2004 build would normally come with the original Edge still, so they've obviously done some tweaks and changes there. In terms of software that comes pre-installed, so we have a number of sort of Dell's own bits and pieces, so options for customizing the display color profiles, support, updates, power management, all the usual things you'd expect. We also find that McAfee is shipped on the system. I would be removing that straight off for my use. Other than that, not a huge amount extra. We have another McAfee thing here. So you have a few Dell bits and pieces and McAfee on there, but nothing too out of the ordinary. So loading up a few different system tools, and we can see here CPU-Z confirms that we have the Tiger Lake generation of Intel Core i5 11th generation i5-1135G7. The base clock is 2.4 gigahertz and a max turbo which should be around 4.2 gigahertz. We can also confirm that as shipped from Dell, this is rather disappointingly running a single memory channel. So we have a single DIMM. It weirdly also reports 8 slots. Obviously there is not. There are 2, but we can see we have a single 8GB DIMM by Samsung running at DDR4 3200 speeds in that slot. We also can confirm the Intel Iris Xe graphics. The Dell Power Management tool, actually quite nice. Similarly to the HP MV X360-13 I looked at, we have options in here for different thermal settings for the processor. So we have optimized, which will be the default that the system ships on. We have a ultra performance, which will allow for higher processor and fan speeds, potentially raising the TDP limit to allow the system to use more power more of the time. And then we also have a couple of reduced performance modes. So Cool is designed to keep the surface temperature of the laptop down, and Quiet is designed to keep the noise level down. So the two will do kind of opposite things. They will both reduce the processor performance. Cool will ramp up the fan speed to try and keep the laptop itself cool, and Quiet will do the opposite. It will allow the temperature to increase higher and run the fan at lower speed so you produce less noise. We can also look in HW Monitor at some aspects of the system. So we can see we have a 40,000 milliwatt hour or 40 watt hour battery. Not huge, but obviously this is only a 14-inch machine, so as you would expect, pleasingly, because this is a brand new machine, it has 0% wear level. One thing I did see interesting was that the registered or recorded clock speeds were creeping up to around 4.4 gigahertz. A little odd considering that Intel give this a maximum of 4.2 as the rated turbo speed. And then if I set Cinebench R20 running, so we can see here we are in the optimized thermals, and we are using around, so we are seeing a power draw of just under 19 watts. So this doesn't use power as aggressively in this short-term turbo mode as, say, the HP Envy X360 with the Ryzen chip that I looked at. And we're seeing, we're getting lower clock speeds when we're running all the cores at full load. But this is going to be 8 threads as opposed to 6 on that 6-core non-SMT Ryzen. Temperatures as well, despite the fact we are using that, are kept relatively in check. So we are seeing, we've recorded a max of 88 for the package, but generally it is keeping it a bit lower than that. It's hard to always hear because I have headphones on at the moment, but we are not getting excessive noise from the machine, although that is ramping up just to control that temperature. Looking at the webcam, itself, and it is a small 720p unit located in the top of the screen here. And we can see in here, despite being under 50 Hz LED lighting, we do not have any noticeable flicker. Obviously, we can see it is a little bit grainy looking, but then again, I am filming this at 8 o'clock at night under, interior lighting. So while it's not going to be as good as a 1080p or 4K external webcam, like some of the Logitech units you can find, for occasional use, it's going to be more than acceptable. It really depends how important the webcam is to you, but for your basic homeschooling or the occasional video conference, I don't see it as a major sticking point. So thanks for watching so far. Do let me know in the comments what you would like to see me testing on this new Dell. I will be doing a longer video comparing it directly to the HP Envy. This particular machine can now be picked up for around, I believe it's just under £600 with the current discounts. That may even drop further with the Black Friday sales coming up. But first impressions seem very nice machine for the money, and I will be exploring the performance more, so do subscribe if you want to see a more in-depth review, performance details, and let me know what you'd like to know about the system as well, because I will be reading and hopefully responding to as many of the comments as possible. Thanks for watching.